Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to MST.TV. So I would love to tell you guys that we are done with all of these crazy buyouts, but let's be real, they aren't stopping anytime soon. Now, some people are trying to look at cards that can be key parts of the meta, either now or down the road after Rise of the Duelist comes to the TCG, and trying to pick those up early, but we're also seeing some cards that were bought out basically because they're incredibly collectible and people think that they should be at a higher price point than what they were previously at. So we'll be looking at both sides of the spectrum here, and I'm sure that in another couple of days, we will be back to see even more of them. Let's get started. Okay, so to kick things off, we'll start with something that a lot of people have been hyping up recently, and that is Rainbow Neos. So there's a trend running around where people are running Neos Fusion, Elemental Hero Neos, and Rainbow Dragon with Predaplant Verte Anaconda in order to bring out Rainbow Neos incredibly easily. Rainbow Neos does have some pretty devastating effects that can flat out win you the game in the right situation by getting rid of all your opponent's monsters or all of their spells and traps or their entire graveyard, and it has picked up a lot of attention. It's very similar to the idea with Red Eyes Dragoon. You're sacrificing some consistency by playing multiple bricks in your main deck and using up extra deck slots, but if you don't draw those bricks and you can get the two monsters onto the field fairly easily, and you can make the Predaplant Verte Anaconda, you have the potential to push for huge damage on any given turn with this play. Now, this card isn't as strong as Red Eyes Dragoon, but the theory behind the application is basically the same thing. Ultimately, whether you want to run it or not depends on whether you feel that the rewards outweigh the possible risks. Now, as a result of this tech, we've seen a huge spike in the price of all versions of Rainbow Neos, all of which are actually quite old. So from the original set, we're seeing secret rares up to around the $50 price point, whereas the ghost rare, the unlimiteds are about $100, and the first eds are at some crazy price point I don't even want to think about. However, even with the lower rarities, the super rare reprints from Legendary Collection are a whole $12 each, and even the commons from the Raw Yellow Mega Pack are $5 to $6 each. So this is definitely a card that I would try to dig out of your bulk if you have it and move your excess copies of, or even the secret rares if you're not really attached, since if the package does pick up some steam, we'll likely see a Rainbow Neos reprint soon. However, even if the trend starts to fall off, I think the ghost and secret rares are likely to retain some value because they are highly collectible. This one is a little bit more tame, but Tin Goldfish is a card that has picked up a little bit of steam with the release of the new Plunder Patrol cards. As a level 4 water monster that can summon a Plunder Patrol out of your hand, it gives the deck access to Bahamut Shark, and in turn, totally awesome. Now, at the same time, this card could see play in Mermails, allowing you to summon out something like Dragoons or Abyss Pike from your hand, which can then allow you to proc their respective effects. Now, I don't know if these plays are optimal or how likely it will be that these decks will play Tin Goldfish, but I believe that's why people are paying attention to this card now, and as a result, the DT versions, which are the highest rarity, are about $9 each, and the supers, which were pretty negligible at under $1 before, are now a whole $3 to $4, so worth setting aside if you find them. There are still OTS pack and Star Pack commons that should be available for only a quarter or so each, so don't freak out if you don't have copies of this card, but if you do, I think that now is definitely the time to move them, because personally I feel like even if these decks are part of the meta, Tin Goldfish won't see too much play in the successful builds. So Nekroz are a deck that is picking up a lot of attention with all of the hype around the new Dragma archetype coming out from Rise of the Duelist later on this year. As a deck that doesn't really rely on its extra deck at all and actually dumps cards from the extra deck to the graveyard, it can very easily trigger cards like Herald of the Arclight in order to search for Nekroz cards. At the same time, Nekroz is also a really strong archetype that doesn't really go into its extra deck at all, so there's a lot of synergy between the two strategies. Of course, Nekroz of Brionac as a card that searches for basically any card from the Nekroz archetype is the card that has received the most attention. Now, for those of you who played during Nekroz format, you'll probably remember Brionac being about a $200 US card. Well, now we're actually seeing the original secret rare copies of Brionac up at $125 a piece for the first editions, with very few quantities available on the market. Unlimited secret rares are now much more tame at around $35 each, while dual power ultras are only around $4 to $5. At the moment, Dragma is actually seeing a lot more success with the Invoked engine in the OCG, though I personally think that the Invoked engine will get hit in some way on an upcoming ban list, and I think that when that happens, Necroz cards will start to jump up in price. So if you're able to, I would definitely pick up all of your reprint Necroz cards sooner rather than later. If you have secrets, you probably have them from all the way back in Necroz format and you're pretty attached to them, but if you don't mind moving them, I would 100% try to move them for this crazy hyped up price while you can. So this is one I didn't actually know about until someone pointed it out to me on Facebook, I believe, but Secret Rare Black Garden is now a $20 card. This is the highest rarity version of the card, I guess, except for maybe the original super rare in first edition, but this version I do like a lot more. It looks a lot cleaner and nicer. Now, on one hand, Black Garden can be an out to Mystic Mine, since it would give your opponents tokens on their side of the board, and then you can combo off after giving them monsters, since they would theoretically now have more monsters on the field than you. And at the same time, Black Garden can be a very key combo piece in certain synchro decks because you can search it with Garden Rose Maiden, and it's an extender to summon a card like Zephyros out of your graveyard. Now, outside of Emancipators, we haven't really seen any other synchro strategies be too successful this format, but if we do, I think that this is a card to keep an eye on. Now, its other prints are all lower rarities and they are fairly cheap. I believe it has a couple of different common prints, so make sure that you're holding on to at least a playset of those lower rarities, but you can go ahead and move the secret rares if you're not planning on using them, or you want to just buy back a cheaper version. Now, Mystical Refpanel has to be one of the most confusing cards to come out in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! It sees play every now and then for one reason or another depending on the format, but because it has such a uniquely worded text and a very specific effect, it seems to confuse everyone all the time. However, Mystical Refpanel did see another buyout this week, and it's actually pretty interesting. I believe it was bought out because of the new 3 Tactical Talents card that's coming out in Rise of the Duelist, allowing you to steal either the Pot of Greed or Confiscation effect from your opponent and apply it for yourself. Obviously super devastating if it goes off, but I'm not sure how consistent this card is actually going to be like resolving, or how consistently it's going to be seeing any meta play. You have to have a hand trap when you're going first, and then you're like expecting your opponent to have 3 tactical talents so that you can resolve Mystical Refpanel. It feels like kind of like an awkward thing to really use. I don't believe the card has seen any side deck play in the OCG either, so it might just be some people theorizing about it for future use. Either way, this card was completely bought out, and there's currently only 1 copy available on TCG Player for a whole $100, so good luck finding some if you're really looking for it. This card has never been reprinted, so theoretically it should be on the reprint radar for Konami soon. Actually, worth noting, it has only ever had 1 printing in the TCG and the OCG, so it's actually never been reprinted in any card game ever. However, this card always seems to spike up and then never actually be too amazing, so it might actually not be worth it. I would just try to move the card and not bother trying to play it, because from what I've seen, even if it's like a decent tech, it's never really that amazing, and it just kind of comes across as being overhyped. And either way, you want to be cautious of that reprint coming in the upcoming Battles of Legends set as well. This is another kind of random one, but ultra rare Trap Eaters are currently a whole $9 lowest on TCG Player. This card has always been sort of interesting, but I think ultimately it's outclassed by cards like Twin Twisters and Cosmic Cyclone in the current format. I'm actually kind of lucky. I have a dozen copies of these from way back in Pepe format. I thought that they were going to be a great answer to Anti-Spell Fragrance and Pendulums that you could then make Stardust Dragon or Ignister Prominence with, but it never really became a thing, and I kind of just like held on to the cards for a few years in my bulk. So I guess it was worth it. Anyways, I think that it's also being considered now because 1, you can use it against Floodgates, but 2, you can use it against Eldritch to get rid of one of their trap monsters, and then use it to make something like an Abyss Dweller or a Baguska. Overall, I don't actually think it's worth a spot in someone's side deck. I feel like it doesn't really solve your problems with the Eldritch, the Subterror, or the Altergeist matchup if you're having an issue there, so I don't think that it's something that will actually see play. Legendary Collection 5Ds is a set that wasn't really opened all that much, so it was probably very simple to get Trap Eater up to this higher price point. I'm fully expecting it to tank back down, not to being $1 or so, but to around the $2, $3, $4 mark really soon, and remember that there are also common prints available. Alright, so this is actually a brand new card from Eternity Code, and it isn't even officially released here in the TCG yet, but Access Code Talker is the first card from the newest set to spike in price unexpectedly, basically more than doubling in price from like $30 all the way up to around $65 or $70. Now, I was actually talking about this card with one of my friends on Facebook, and I told him I thought it was ridiculously undervalued and that it should be a $70 to $80 card. Not only is it a cover card, but it has effects that can't be responded to, it can blow up a bunch of your opponent's cards, and it can get really, really big in the right circumstance. In my opinion, it's going to be very similar to Appaloosa and Borrelsword Dragon and become one of the most expensive chase cards for the next year or so until it does get reprinted, because it is just that good. Now, I was lucky, I bought 7 copies for around $33 each, so I get to share those with some of my friends and whatnot. Now, admittedly, it is still early, so I think that when the set officially drops here in North America, it will tank to around the $50 mark. But remember, so did Borrelsword Dragon, and that jumped up all the way to around $80 to $90 before the Battles of Legend reprint was first announced, and I believe that this card's price movement will be fairly similar. So yeah, I'm gonna recommend waiting a bit now that it has already spiked, but just long enough for it to dip back to around the $45 to $50 mark, because I'm fully expecting this to be one of the most sought after cards for the rest of 2020. So this is a really random buyout that I feel like didn't have a catalyst other than the fact that people felt it should be worth more than what it was. So Gagage Cowboy Ultimate Rare has actually jumped up all the way to the $75 mark, which is pretty insane. I personally am still used to seeing it at around the $20 mark, but we did see it face a couple of buyouts over the last half a year or so, primarily because of the changes to the time rule, where you can theoretically use Gagage Cowboy to cheese out wins in time, which I guess is funny, but whatever. Now, nothing has changed over the past week, so I believe that this is just another product of the whole buyout trend that we've been seeing recently, with people thinking that this is an old Ultimate Rare that could have meta implications in the future, and so they buy out the card preemptively. Of all the things to randomly buy out, I suppose this wasn't a horrible choice, though personally I wouldn't pay close to $75 for it. I think that realistically it'll settle back down to around the $40 mark, maybe as high as $50, just because it is an older Ultimate Rare with relatively few quantities on the market, and we're never really going to see a higher rarity for Gagage Cowboy than Ultimate Rare. So this is an opportunity for people to sell the card now and then buy it back later when the hype has settled down. Alright, and the last card that I want to talk about here, guys, is the Ghost Gold Rare Blue Eyes White Dragon from Gold Series 5 Haunted Mine. So for those of you who didn't know, this card has been fairly expensive for the last while. I remember before you'd be able to grab these for only around $10 or so, but recently they've trended upwards in price to around the $20 to $30 mark. Now, however, you are looking at around $75 for a single near mint copy of this card. Now, to be honest, as much as it feels like this is just another random buyout by the market, it doesn't actually surprise me at all. Obviously, Blue Eyes is one of the most iconic cards in the game, but at the same time, this is probably one of the most unique printings of the card that we've gotten here in the TCG. The Ghost Rare effect is really popular with a lot of players who see it as the highest rarity, and this is definitely a really cool collector's card for a lot of people. It doesn't really surprise me that with all of this extra stimulus money running around, that people are turning to such an iconic card in such a unique rarity as their buyout target of choice. I actually think that this price is unlikely to trend downwards anytime soon, unless there's a huge supply of these hidden somewhere that I don't know about. So if you were hoping for the price to drop before you picked yours up, I'm sorry, but you just might be out of luck. Alright everyone, that is it for today's episode. There were some actually pretty interesting buyouts to discuss this week. I definitely prefer it when I can actually discuss some of the reasoning behind a buyout, rather than just telling you guys about a buyout and leaving it at that. So this episode was actually really fun to do. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy the conversation here today, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me, and as always, leave a comment down below. Let me know what's going on with the market in case I missed something, so that I can hopefully cover it in a future episode and keep all of you as informed as possible. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button for all of the latest content from Tombox and myself. So until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.